was raised on the East Coast. Most of my family still lives in New Jersey. And when my children were young, I'd bring them back to see my family and we'd stay with my mom. Especially during the holidays, I would watch my mom go, go, go. She found a lot of joy in baking and cooking and just making everything perfect for all of us and to make our holidays very special. She never seemed to rest, just taking care of all those details. But after the holidays, my mom would just drop for a full day. She would tell us that she was recharging her battery. She gave herself the rest she needed. Recharging the battery. Don't we all need time to rest, reboot, and recharge? In the scriptures, we learn that the reason God created the Sabbath was the same reason he created the entire world, the same reason he sacrificed his only begotten Son, for us. In fact, in today's gospel, we are told that the Sabbath was made for man, and not man for the Sabbath. God, in his infinite wisdom, knew we would get overwhelmed. He knew we would need to recharge our battery. The Sabbath commandment to keep the Sabbath holy, like all the commandments, is not meant to hold us down, but to build us up, to recharge us, to center us. Let's just think about that for a minute. So as we heard in the gospel, the religious leaders confronted Jesus on this issue. Jesus' disciples are scolded by the scribes and the Pharisees, not for plucking and eating corn from the field, but for doing it on the Sabbath. They were concerned with the idea of Jesus' disciples that they were working on the Sabbath, because they considered the plucking of the corn as work. So in defending his disciples, Jesus reminds them that from the scriptures, human need has precedence over ritual custom. He tells them that when David and his men were fleeing for their lives, the only bread he had was the holy bread offered in the temple. The bread only the priests were supposedly allowed to eat. But in their hunger, David and his men ate of that bread. So here essentially, Jesus is reminding the Pharisees that the Sabbath was given for our benefit. It was intended for good, not to weigh us down. In the first reading from Hebrews, we hear that in Christ, we have an anchor of the soul, sure and firm, which reaches into the interior behind the veil. That tells me we are to look inside, not to abolish the rules, but to look beyond them, look into the interior behind the veil. We're asked to look behind the command to the gift that it is from God, the invitation that it is to come into closer relationship with him. Let's look at someone who received such an invitation. Today, our church remembers St. Anthony Abbot. Anthony lived in the 3rd and 4th centuries. He's also known as Anthony of the Desert and the father of monasticism. As I pondered on his life and why he is celebrated in our church, it really brought back home the invitation we are given in that Sabbath commandment to come into closer relationship with God and his Son. So a little bit about that St. Anthony. His parents died when he was very young, and he inherited quite a bit of money and land. As he listened to the Gospels, though, he really felt drawn to the simplicity that God was asking of us and the opportunity it provides for us to become in closer relationship with him. He renounced his wealth, selling everything he had, just to literally become closer to the Lord. He went to live up on a mountain for many, many years. He created a physical monastery so that he could understand his spiritual monastery. He lived a life of contemplation and just true holiness. People came to know about Anthony. He had an effect on so many people by his demonstration of true holiness that those around him begged him to teach his way of life. So through this, he came to found monasticism. And through his example, people learned the importance of that peacefulness and solitude, silence, prayer, and being alone with our Creator. So we too can learn from Anthony. The monastic life didn't weigh him down, it built him up. I'm certainly not saying that we're all called to monastic life. I know that I'm not. But we can see the gift of the Sabbath, a time to find that our own personal monastery, you might say. And that's what I think is so beautiful about the rest that God literally commands of us in the Sabbath. We are so blessed that while God saw the importance of work, he specifically set aside time for us to rest, to reflect, and recharge. Through our Catholic faith, we have help too. We have times like this that we can gather to be holy, to receive Christ in the Eucharist. We can be in solitude with Christ in adoration, and of course participate in the sacrifice of Mass. So like Anthony going to the desert, we can create our own spiritual monasteries. This is the meaning of the scripture. The Sabbath was made for man and not man for the Sabbath. We should just recognize and celebrate the gift we are receiving from God and carry forward the Sabbath themes of contemplative rest. God gives us this gift. He allows time to recharge our battery, time to live our own spiritual monastery, time to live in complete holiness. Amen.